Okay, good afternoon. Hello, I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Try and figure out what the future is for smart buildings or smarter buildings. The panelists are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you're wondering who we are. Point to note is that the views expressed here are personal and not of any company or organization. Please do post questions, comments, and chat on the Zoom chat. I want to make this as interactive as possible. And in case you want anything that's on this slide deck, it is also available on mondaylive.org. So welcome. So
Nice job.
This being the month of July, we are talking about disruption, specifically the disruption to buildings, to building automation, and the dynamics around disruption, what it takes to do the disruption and related discussions. So that's what we're all about this month. And we're going to be talking about, we've talked about cloud native quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. And we talked about it generally in the first week, and then why cloud native is important. And then this week, we're really going to talk about having a discussion about what is cloud native and how does it work, and just sort of as much of that as we can get into this week. So looking forward to that. Just as a note, programming note, we are not going to be doing Monday Live over the course of August. We're going dark, we're going fishing, going on vacation, any other term you want to use other than dark, but we're not going to be here. And we'll return on September 11th. So with that, hand it over to Ken. What's going on, Ken?
Thanks, Anto. Magazine's going well. I wanted to focus back on our industry-edited dynamic library landing launchpad, because what's happening is we're getting a lot of great posts on LinkedIn, and although social media is powerful, and now it disappears, and as some people pointed out, that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing when we're trying to document an industry, which is what I'm trying to do. So the importance of having people and sponsors connected to our site is useful. We've been at this for 25 years, and as I'll probably be at it for another 25 years, it's important that we get this information. It's too much for me to do, but if everybody adds their little bit, it's there. And when people come searching for it from a context point of view, which automated buildings seems to be some of the words they start looking for. And also quite often smart and smarter buildings refer you back to automated buildings as well. So anyway, bottom line, C4SB did a great job in their presentation with Keith and Mike, and their video. The video is now online. It's a great document. It came in a post, but I've taken it back and stuck it on our site so that it can be found with the C4SB contributing editor profile that's there. So again, that's what I'm trying to do. And in addition to that, I'm trying to bring as many industry players as I can as contributing editors. My first worry was that I would be overwhelmed by how much they wrote, but the bottom line is they're more apt to post on LinkedIn, which I can understand, but then what it allows me to do is to sort of cherry pick, and basically what we're including in all of their profiles is their LinkedIn connection. So as a library, I believe that it is important to attach the people who are creating the new industry. And if we just simply become a resource where all of these people are listed, I think that adds value. That's my thoughts on that. We're bringing on Brian, is from New Zealand. He's a marketer. His latest post talks about using short video. Another thing that I encourage the industry to follow us is, as we're reinventing automated buildings, we're trying to find out that what is the new medium that we're speaking. People are getting tired of reading words. They're listening to podcasts. They're looking at short videos. So we're trying to figure out the best approach there. Greg is with Cochrane, and he's starting a new division, actually a couple of them, and he's been writing some stuff for us already, and we want to bring him on and highlight what he's doing and his new division in Cochrane. Paul is one of our existing editors from the old site who had basically retired, and now we've fluffed him up and recycled him, and he's back. And he's been doing some work with Lawrence Berkeley Labs and DOE on the automated generation of a ASHRAE spec. So that's good stuff. And Manny is again another one of our existing authors that is coming back. He's working in the cybersecurity area of industrial control, and he sees some parallels. And in addition to that, he's been working running some training stuff here in Victoria. He hasn't quite got his profiles ready yet, so that's why he's dark. So lots of stuff happening. Really pleased to have as part of our library the people who are changing the industry. Back to you.
Good to see Paul back, Ken.
Yep.
Sorry?
I said, good to see Paul back in the mix.
Yes, yeah, he he said, well, I'm not going to write that much, but the thing is all of these people, they kind of work on a project for 6 months, and then they release it and they share it. I'm not looking for them to post every day. I'm just looking to have them connected. It's important that the industry knows them, because we all know Paul, but there's anybody that joined us in the last 2 or 3 years, somebody like Bill, I bet you doesn't know who Paul is and how he did do radical change. Of course, Paul and I have a long history. Paul took over the engineered systems automation column from me, and then we published him as author on automated buildings for that time. So everybody remembers the old days of OBEX and all kinds of neat history.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ken. I had just one thing. I watched this movie a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to bring it up to everybody's attention here. It's a movie about BlackBerry. It's called BlackBerry. And the reason why I thought I'd bring it up here is because it is about disruption. And in fact, it's about disruption times 2, because the beginning of the movie is really about how BlackBerry disrupted the phone market. And towards the end, it's about how it got disrupted. Right. So it's got I know that I spoiled it all for you, but I think you know the story anyway. But it's just interesting watching that. And as this is a review that I read, it's really not about the technology or the company. It's really just about the humanity, the humans, and the interaction. I thought it was really interesting. And I thought of many of the people that's in this industry when I was watching that. So,
where was that on, Anton? Netflix or? I
think it's Netflix or Apple Plus or something. It's online. I watched it.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. And just the link board as before. Nothing really changed on that. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I had a quick one.
Go ahead, I'll follow.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Just a quick one. I'll post it in the thing too. There was if you know who Swarm is a small company that SpaceX bought a year ago or so. They were making micro satellites for communications specifically in the IoT space, right? So that you can have satellite communications for small, highly distributed facilities. You know, I think bank branches and stuff like that. They put an announcement out a couple of days ago, I guess, which was interesting. And they're holding new device sales only because SpaceX is moving from satellite to dish to satellite to cell technology. So they're about to release what they call satellite direct to cell technologies, and the Swarm is going to leverage the satellite to cell technologies, which is actually a really big deal. So you don't have to do dishes and stuff when you're building. So something to watch if you're doing anything with remote management or small buildings in a distributed environment. Interesting take.
That's very interesting, Anna.
Yeah. Keep a close eye on it.
So an observation on my part. First of all, you guys made me feel so guilty. I changed my shirt to black, and you got now I feel like I'm part of the group today. But an observation for me is this. So in spite of some of the articles and information that I have access to talking about commercial real estate, occupancy level, value going down and buildings and so forth and so on, looking at the statistics and analysts and everything else, that they're still predicting our industry is growing on average around between 11 to as high as 18% CAGR per year through 2030. So again, despite all of that, we're seeing the opposite, where the industry is, moving, it's growing, etc. And I have to concur that I believe it's growing, and based on what we're doing at my company, and when I'm talking to partners and other people within the industry. So it's kind of a yin and a yang going on. So which I think is a good thing. There's not everybody's are naysayers. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I guess that could be two parts, Mark, couldn't it? It could be that whilst the industry's seeing, with the occupancy space down and stuff, that it's just the momentum of things that were committed to 2 or 3, 4 years ago, because pension funds invest in it a long time to, before buildings stop being built and stuff. But the other thing is are we embracing more things now other than just building management systems and automation, and picking up more of the add-ons for cloud sort of features and picking up some of these things? Is that being included in the numbers? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I feel that part of the driving the numbers is retrofits and taking existing facilities and obviously upgrading them accordingly, whether energy efficiency, ESG, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever you'd really want to, or a combination thereof. Well,
Okay.
Retrofit, I think, was always about 75% of the market anyway, but it's clearly moving upwards.
I'm going to say, with Mark's comment, I'll add this comment. I wasn't going to say it, but this month's theme, Anto, by the way, in large part due to the work you've done, it just seems like a natural evolution, and I told you this privately, you could almost take the theme of the cloud native theme and turn it into a business model. It's so useful and practical. And so I think with what Mark's seeing, with what he's seeing, and what we're doing this month, I think it's super practical and a real value add, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Maybe that's, we haven't totally decided exactly how we're going to do next week, which is the last week in July. So maybe we'll focus on that with the application of the cloud native. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on. So we are talking about disruptive buildings. Just in case people are not aware of this picture, this is all about the Ford quote about people wanting faster horses. But I think we've beaten that one to death for this month. So we'll move on. So just sort of this journey, just reminding us, we want to talk about cloud native. What is cloud native and how does it work? That's kind of the focus of this week. Just where we've been this month, we talked about a vision of what buildings will be like in 2030, and we said they'll be cloud native. That's kind of the statement that we made. Then there obviously is a need to explain what cloud native is, because cloud is used a lot these days for different sort of there's different nuances of the word cloud. What we mean by cloud native is the public cloud, the private cloud, and the on-prem systems in a building all being part of the cloud. So it's really the cloud reaching into the building, or the building reaching up to the cloud, whichever way you want to look at it. So think about this whole sort of environment as a computing platform where processing, storage, input and output can happen anywhere in this thing. And we also talked about the fact that for this to happen, you really need a structured way to connect the premise, the buildings to the cloud, and that's the role of the IBB that we've talked about. And we also talked about the fact that cloud native is not very strange to us, or shouldn't be very strange, because we all have a cloud native device in our pockets or in our purse or whatever you carry. And these are kind of the attributes of what cloud native is all about. It's connected to the cloud all the time. The day-to-day operation is not dependent on the cloud, but the cloud is there whenever it's needed. And this thing, in this case, the phone, or in the building, in our case, is really part of the owner's environment, part of the ERP, part of the system, and also part of how it's operated, and it's the way it's managed, and the fact that it's scalable, et cetera, et cetera. So these are kind of the attributes of what how to think about cloud native, and so we talked about that last couple of weeks, and so what I sort of put together is a few slides here based on the Smarter Stack, and I'm going to go through them rather quickly. There's quite a few sort of builds here, but I want to go through quickly, and then maybe we can refer back to it. So we're all familiar with the Smarter Stack, and what I've done here is I've said that in the Smarter Stack, there could be stuff that's happening in the cloud, and there could be stuff that's happening in the IBB. It's kind of, the sort of the left and right. It's not the traditional up and down. The purpose of doing all of this is to provide choice, to make it specifiable, security, manageability, et cetera, who's going to run it, who's going to operate it, meaning the IBB, integrators, facility managers, etc., how it gets delivered, how the value gets delivered through web dashboards and digital twins and other sort of things that we've talked about over the years, the sort of applications that will run in this cloud native buildings, anything from analytics to grid enablement. And this is where it starts to get interesting, because the IBB, we put the IBB really here in the stack. It goes across multiple layers. So something like apps, these can actually be in the IBB, or it can be in the cloud. And that's kind of part of the whole thing. It matters a lot in the application, but from an architecture, it doesn't matter. You can put an analytics application in the IBB, or you can put it in the cloud, wherever it best suits the project or the circumstances for that case, right? So this is the part of the flexibility. The exchange is really how data and applications and systems find each other. So things like middleware and semantics are some of those sort of cloud-centric things, but orchestrations and things like gateways could actually be in the IBB. And this is exactly the point of it. In terms of the data layer, things like the IDL can exist either in the cloud or in the IBB. Depends on what the application is, and it can even move dynamically if you want it to be. The sort of systems, all of the different systems we know about, and the sort of physical items, I think that's all pretty pretty predictable. So what I did is I said, okay, how does this, and we actually talked about this last week, how does this look with a phone? Right, so the cloud native phone, in other words, a smartphone, right? What are the purpose? The purpose is to be mobile, to communicate, to be low cost, and to provide information, and to be there for emergency. And there's a whole bunch of other potential boxes you can put in there. Who operates it? We do, whether it's consumer on businesses or within families. How it gets delivered, the actual service gets delivered by telcos. The signal is delivered by cell towers. It can be used in the home, or it can be used when you're walking down the street. Again, that gives you sort of a flavor of the sort of flexibility that we're talking about. And the apps. So I put Facebook in the cloud, but the phone application and something like GPS is actually on the phone. But obviously, we all know that GPS works with the cloud when we're actually using it, and something like Facebook, you actually use it on your phone, and yet it's in the cloud, right? So this is kind of this duality that's happening over again, and we're used to this. We do this every single day. We use phones, obviously, every single day these days. The exchange, again, how things find each other. There's obviously a whole sort of range of APIs that are cloud-centric, that are sort of provided by services in the cloud. There's things like OpenAuth, which enables people to work systems with working with each other. We have APIs down on the operating system level, the OS API, and then we actually have the operating system themselves, right? So we have all of these things, and in terms of data, we have data in the cloud. We can use the cloud for backup, so we can also use the phone itself for video and photos. And again, I put that sort of off the phone a bit, because we all know that the photo, once we take it, and most of the phones that we use these days, it gets synchronized in the cloud, right? So again, it kind of doesn't matter, right? Because this is how the whole thing's architected. The same with something like contacts, right? It's in the phone, but it's also in the cloud. The sort of systems that exist in the phone, CPUs, radio, etc., that's kind of what's there, and the actual physical thing, right? So the purpose of doing this is really just to demonstrate that the sort of the behavior of cloud native things is naturally bringing in together the cloud, the whatever breadth you want to think about the cloud, and the device, in this case the phone, and make it work together in a way that we experience today, the way we use the phone, right? In a way we're using the cloud and we're using the device simultaneously, and it's all kind of intermingled with each other. I went down the path of trying to do one on a car with sort of Tesla and EVs. I'm not sure I got these right, so I'm just going to bring them all up just to give some ideas of what we're talking about. Right, sort of the exchange layer. There's cloud AI. AI happens both in the cloud and it happens on board as well, right? Data. There's data on the device itself in terms of images, and then there's data in the cloud, whether it's map data or maintenance information and other stuff. So again, it's the local and the cloud gets all sort of convoluted in the sort of quantum sense, which is gets quite confusing if you try and sort of think about it in sort of black and white. So that's kind of all I have as a way just to sort of compare and contrast the sort of what cloud native buildings, comparing it to phones and cars, and would love to get any thoughts or questions or dialogue on this.
Good job, Anto. Very good job.
Yeah.
I could have used this a few days ago when I was trying to explain cloud native and was failing miserably. So yeah, a great resource. Thanks.
So the customer experience here is a very blended and largely transparent between its local device and cloud resources and so forth, right? Everything is just kind of works, and a lot of this stuff goes on behind the scenes automatically. Like my phone will move songs on and off depending on what I listen to or don't listen to automatically, and I don't even know it. So, okay.
And I like the car example. I mean, the phone one is interesting because everyone can relate to it. But the car one and the Tesla one, and Tracy and I can relate to this one, is it's a lot more what's the word? It's a lot more relatable to our application because you're dealing with systems and operations and in the case of the Tesla, controls. Thanks, Tracy, into the controls piece, right? So you want to make sure that whatever cloud native you're doing doesn't put the system at risk in any way, right? Because you don't want to put the car at risk in any concept. So the car example to me is a really good one, a lot more parallel to us from a comparison risk control perspective. Yet it's still seamless, right? I mean, there are a lot of parallels again that from a cloud native perspective, it's to Tracy's point, it's moving songs up and down for me as well. It's doing navigation, it's doing, software updates, but I'm not dependent on the cloud for its fundamental operation.
Yeah.
Thing that you say that, and I agree with what you said, but kind of a sidebar since you're talking about the car, Tesla. So my neighbor has a Tesla and he went somewhere and went to get back in, locked the car, went to get back in, and he locked his mobile phone by accident in the car. He couldn't get the car started because it starts from the mobile phone. So it took him 8 hours to finally get somebody to unlock the car and for him to go about his way. So, but again, obviously with what we're talking about, the cloud native plays definitely an intriguing and a really, can play a really good role in the whole way that we operate and manage buildings today. So it's
Well, so I give you a counter to that guy who locked his phone in the car. And Tracy and I both have Teslas as well. And so I made sure, for example, that my wife has the app as much as I have the app. If I ever have locked my phone in the car, I will get hold of my wife and she can unlock the Tesla remotely for me from wherever she's at right now. Contrast that to if the guy had just locked his keys in the car and that was his only set of keys, he's in a similar predicament, probably.
I always use the key fob. So I did one time, I got someplace where I couldn't get my phone to connect to my car, like a local grocery store, just trying it out. And so now I carry a key fob.
Well, and then I usually run it on the phone, but I also have the card now that I keep in my wallet as my alternative. Well, I'm even lazy enough to I just call my wife and tell her I open it.
But
Okay.
your point is good, and that's a good example of cloud native. It doesn't matter if it's a key fob or a card or a phone, and the phone can be anywhere, right? I could be traveling across the country and lock things up, call my wife, and she could unlock it for me.
Yeah,
Right.
one of the things I put here on the purpose line here, right at the end, is the purpose of electric car is to be car-like. And the reason I put it there is that we've seen obviously electric cars being talked about for decades, but none of them were car-like, right? There were sort of niche things that you could buy and you couldn't insure them or you couldn't charge them, and they didn't behave like a car, right? And obviously what Tesla and now many other people are doing is actually making something that actually feels like a car. So it sort of softens the disruption. You're not disrupting that part of it.
It's a faster horse, right?
It's a faster horse, but it goes way past that, Anto. To be honest, I mean, everything that you've got up here, I think, again, this is a good set, and I'm going to steal this slide. In that, at the end of the day, weirdly enough, with my Tesla, the EV thing was totally secondary to the whole experience. Like I was like, oh yes, I get all of this capability and all this functionality. to be honest, if I had this same functionality in an ICE car, internal combustion engine car, I'd be just as happy. It's the experience. The fact that it's electric is actually just a bonus in my world, actually, weirdly enough, because it's the experience that all this gave me, which is the same thing that your phone experience, right? And I think we need to focus in on that, right? I think the EV thing is actually a bit of a distraction. It's what all this stuff, the experience that this gives me and the experience that the Tesla thing gives me is the compelling piece. And I don't think we've done a good job in our space to have a similar experience, right? Our experience is still, a computer in the basement underneath the chiller.
From a disruption standpoint, that's an important point too, right?
Yes.
That both the car-like point that Anto made, but your point as well, Anto, and it's kind of interesting because I shouldn't assume everybody has, I have the assumption that, you know what, all that like charging infrastructure will work itself out. Range will work itself out. That's a technology thing, and I don't care how they do it as long as they kind of get it done. And I think our industry, there's a lot of that needs to happen, that, we're very worried about the how. And I've always kind of thought, well, the how will work itself out. There's a lot of smart people out there that will figure that piece out.
But the people who enjoy the experience, the people who benefit from the experience, is actually not necessarily us. I mean, we hopefully will enjoy the increase in business. That's the experience that we want. But the people who enjoy the experience are the people who are consuming all of this information, right? Which is either the owner or the operators.
So think about what Adam said.
Go ahead,
Not-
Bill.
Sorry about Roger. It's not car like. It's a better car. It's not
Yeah.
phone like. It's a better phone. It's not building like. It's a better friggin' building.
Yeah,
But it's still a building. That's
aspect.
my point is that it's still a building. Yeah.
It's a better building, Anto. Don't sell yourself short.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what the slides do, Anto, is it helps. I mean, originally, I think in people's minds, the cloud is where data sits. Actually, what this is showing is it doesn't matter where the data sits, because it could be in the car, it could be on the phone, it could be in our industry on edge devices or smarter equipment. So if the equipment's smart enough and has the intelligence and has the ability, sometimes you need it local, sometimes you share it. But if you take like the Tesla itself, it's important to run it and what it's doing there and the data for that particular car, but they're better cars because all the data from all the cars is going up, and they're learning from all those cars to actually share the experience. So there's this whole kind of horses for courses of where the data actually sits. But I think there was always this preconceived idea that the cloud is just, that's where the data sits, but it's not true. And these slides actually help show that.
Well,
So-
it used to be true, and it was quite transformational when that happened. But we've moved on. The cloud technology has moved on to be this, but it's still that the cloud as a storage is still there. We're not taking that away.
No,
I think Bill made a really important point here, though, that from a business standpoint matters a whole bunch. If it were just another car, guess what would happen? It would be all about the price at that point, right? Or if it were just another phone or whatever. So there is a very key and important element here that our job is to both build out the infrastructure and feature set that's needed to reach this vision. That results in a better building. Otherwise, we're going to go down the same path of, goes to the lowest bidder, and then everything is value engineered out and so on and so forth. All the things we don't about our industry, right?
So is that the challenge, though, Tracy? Is building on what you were saying is, so far, everybody here in our market and everything else, all we've been focused on is building another car or building another phone. I mean, is the part of our challenge is that we're missing the Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk in our space to do the disruption? Is that what's missing here?
I hadn't thought about it until this call, but I think there's some truth to that, or a lot of truth, that we've been so focused on just putting the basic infrastructure in place
Right.
that we haven't really taken the step that's going to create disruption, which is that next step of a better experience, better building.
And I
Oh.
think
Consider this. Hold on, Mark. Hold on. Consider this, Anno, Tracy. There's something right here. Like everybody, when they think of Tesla, they think of the whole electronic vehicle. Think about us. When we've been thinking about buildings, it's all about the smarts or the energy, whatever. But to me, that's a ruse. That's a secondary.
Right.
We should just be talking about better buildings.
One problem we have though is the scale. Like every building is so unique.
Yeah.
That we need to, like when you lay this out, you realize how complex that is. And then you say, I'm going to implement it, and you start implementing it for building A, and you have to start moving some of this stuff around. You have to interface with legacy equipment. You don't get that luxury of having a million of these things that are the same. So I think that slows us down, and it makes it harder for us to disrupt in a kind of just a cut, like an automotive, a brand new automotive can come out and can have these features, and it's there, and they will build a million more like it. We have this situation that if we come out with one of these buildings, it's a unique, people come and ooh and ah, and then they go on and build all of their unique buildings. So
I mean, there's obviously a point there, but I would actually argue that my phone is different to every single phone in the world, my smartphone.
Yep.
Right. And I'm sure Anno's Tesla is different to Tracy's Tesla, and with everybody else, every other Tesla. I know it's not quite the same thing, but I'm just saying that it's a different kind of disruption. And I would actually say one other thing is that if you think about not the users being the human beings, but if you think about the things that are being managed, that's involved, the number of things that we have far exceeds the number of things that are in the phones or in the car, right? We have buildings with hundreds of thousands of points, literally, right? It's a different kind of dynamics, different kind of technology, but
It is a key driving factor that we need to consider if we want to disrupt this industry,
yes.
right? We need to make our stuff as repeatable and scalable as possible.
Yep.
So that means less free programmable controllers, more configurable controllers, right? More standardized mechanical elements and equipment where possible, and so on.
But to Ken's
So
point,
Tracy,
I got it. I got the floor right now. Hold on. I got to get this off my chest.
We
Thank
couldn't hear you.
Okay, is this. So I think it comes down to two things. We've talked about experience for sure. And I'm not talking about the occupant experience. I'm talking about the experience of me as an owner, an operator, a manager of buildings. For me, my experience and experience that I have to create, I want to create to run that building better. Now I'm gonna come back to that. The other is outcomes. All right, now to Bill's point, wherever you are there, buddy, is you said better buildings. My definition of a better building is different than yours, different than Rogers, Anno, or whatever. That gets into what you just said, Tracy. More technology offerings that I can tailor this to whatever my experience that I'm looking to do.
Which is
Yeah.
the magic element of the smartphone and the car.
Correct.
You tailor it, you make it.
Anto, is you may have an iPhone. I got an iPhone, but the way you set it up, your apps and everything are to your experience and to what you want, which is different than mine, and so forth and so on. And I think this is where cloud native has a huge opportunity as the enabler to be able to do that.
Maybe just going back to what Ken said about, that there's millions of Teslas and stuff. I think maybe we're not thinking down far enough in that within a building, there are millions of chillers, or there's millions of pumps, there's millions of air handling units. And maybe we're not getting down to those edge devices and thinking of those things of all being part of the cloud. Yes, they need to be interoperable on site, which has traditionally been done by the BAS system, but they can actually be that multiple unit, which is the same. And going back to Tracy's point about the applications being more standardized, it can be at that level with a chiller or a pump or an air handler. And it's only the fact that we're kind of been using building automation systems that the engineering of those has become a specialist kind of field. If you break down and say those edge devices are part of the cloud native building as well, then you could start thinking differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and remember in our industry, there are different
Steve, I think
segments.
wanted the floor, but you finished, Tracy.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So, okay, I think that the key word for me is accessibility. I think why did cloud native come into existence? Because in the IT world, or in the information technology world, they wanted to make information as accessible as possible for any use case imaginable, right? Well, they don't, in that scenario, they weren't really thinking about our world of buildings. They're largely thinking of traditional applications, and they want those applications to live and work with the IT type devices, whether it's a phone or a laptop or tablet, right? We have an accessibility problem, and we've introduced the IBB. Now's the time to really talk about it, because it is the enabler for accessibility. So to Roger's point, we got to get all the way down to every little thing in the building and every system type, whether it's access control, video, building automation, you name it, right? All of those things need to become easily accessible. And what we're arguing is that cloud native architecture is the way to accomplish that. But in our case, we're not talking about a phone, which, if you think about how applications are developed on phones, the world of application developers have to think about two OSs, right? Whether it's either Android or it's iOS. So we don't have that common development environment today. That's the idea behind the IBB, as I understand it, right? So I think it's very important that we not just assume that's going to happen. We've got to really build the case for it, and as part of this discussion, or talk through alternatives to an IBB. But one way or another, we've got, to me, that core functionality of making the data accessible for application, because we're in the building information business. Fundamentally, that's our business. And today we are hamstrung in terms of making that information easily accessible to the world for whatever reason they want to have it, they want to use it, right? Doesn't matter. And my argument is, with this phone, people can they're thinking up new stuff all the time, right? It's just, it's a world of creativity and innovation round the clock. We are not able to enable that world of innovation and creativity in our world because we can't get to the data easily, affordably. And so I'd love to have some more discussion around the importance of the IB as part of the solution.
Yeah. Count me in.
And actually, in the IT world, with cloud native architecture starting to become visible a decade ago, let's say, there were new platforms that came about. And that's why some of us and customers have been asking for, begging for new architectures to allow for more access to more data types, different system types. And we've been slow to recognize that they've been crying and begging for it. Now, like in the gaming community, to throw in just another sort of architecture, gaming architectures are cloud native. They started taking advantage of the hybrid architectures. My son can play on his computer. My other son can play on his Xbox. Another friend can play on her Xbox or whatever the system is. And they're all playing in this virtual, physical, the IO is happening wherever it's happening. So there are other domains where the architectures have started to take root beyond the car and the phone. And owners are aware of that. And customers, large scale ones, including here, a lot of governments, frankly, with large portfolios, and they've been begging for more unified, more interoperability. And we do, to Steve's point, we do have a physical layer connection problem to have access to the digital assets that we call data, but it's actually sometimes it's a valve or it's a VAV box or whatever. We've had that block, that problem, and we're going to overcome it by showing how the IBV can overcome that. But the cloud native application to our space will allow a lot of creative innovators and entrepreneurs to start doing creative things that we never imagined also, just like in the gaming space.
This is going to be like any other marketplace where there's not one solution that fits everybody, right? That's why there's Androids and iPhones, and there's still people using flip phones, and there are people marketing, stripped down simple phones for old people, and so on and so forth. And our market's going to be the same. The verticals that we play in that are retail and repeatable and high volumes of the same kind of building, for instance, can't imagine it any other way than what we're talking about, right? You would never build a custom system between this McDonald's and that McDonald's and the next McDonald's, right? They got to be the same. So that mentality already stands. Now you take that, open it up to not just McDonald's, but all the other brands. Next thing you know, somebody comes along and says, I have a small commercial building. Can I utilize this? And we get innovative about how do we make our existing stuff work in that application. And all of a sudden we've got movie theaters and furniture stores and food prep, locations, and it'll find a seed, a garden to start, and it will grow from there. And it won't,
I think
won't be for everybody all the time, but
that's a really important point, Tracy, especially in trying to be disruptive and crossing the chasm and all that sort of thing. I mean, look at Henry Ford. The disruptive car he had was a Model T. That was it, right? There was only one. It wasn't a truck. It wasn't, a delivery van. It wasn't a sports car. It wasn't a high performance limo. There was a whole lot of things it wasn't, at the beginning. It was just one thing, right? And to your point, he proved his market. iPhone was no different, right? It never had all the apps and everything else when it first started. It was just so radically different to the BlackBerry. In fact, your BlackBerry movie thing is going to be fascinating, Anto. So he focused on you could make phone calls, you could have email, you could do text, you could do maps and a couple of other bits and pieces, but there was enough, right, to prove the point and make it consistent.
I think Jim was wanting to make a point.
Yeah, could you bring up the car slide for a minute, Anto, again?
Okay.
I'll start making my point while he brings it up. Look, I mean, to me, the question here is who cares? Not who cares, but who cares rhetorically and specifically. If you look at the car slide or the phone slide, Anto said something very profound, which is that it's the experience. But what I'd like to point out is many of these other elements existed before the iPhone, before the car. And it was the consolidation of these things and making them cool and compelling that moved the needle forward. You know, OnStar was reporting where cars were long before any of this came along. We had backup cameras. We had many of these features in non-Tesla cars. What Elon Musk did is he pulled it together and made it cool. It was a market timing and marketing problem. The same thing with Steve Jobs, and he had a hat trick with that in every case. So I want to point out that it's not that they actually innovated by bringing all these different cells that are on the slide. They innovated by bringing them together and making it cool. And I
Yeah,
want to point out something really interesting here, which is who owns Cool, or who owns that portion of our industry of buildings? It's not the controls industry that owns that. It's architecture, right? Architects have dominated and controlled, and very carefully controlled over a long period of time, what is defined as cool in buildings, whether it's facades or shapes or uses, etc. So the question is that, you know, is that where we need to go disrupt?
So let's just extend on that, Jim, and that's brilliant point, because I think even when you think about the phone, you know, Steve Jobs, you know, the phones belonged back in the day, the phones all belonged to the big guys, AT&T, you know, and those were the guys who owned the phones and the phone systems and everything else. He came along and said, no, a software company can make phones, right? Same thing with Tesla, right? The car industry was owned by the big four, to your point. He was outside of that industry and made it cool. Henry Ford, to your point, no different, right? I mean, cars were around before. It wasn't like there were cars before the Model T was there. He made the whole thing cool and affordable to the marketplace, right? And that's what he changed. So yeah, I think, you know, that's the part that I'm with you on this one, Jim. I think I'm struggling with that too, because we are so mired in the group that is the existing incumbents, just like the existing incumbent car manufacturers, the existing incumbent phone manufacturers, the existing incumbent, you know, well, you know it.
Where are we?
I think
where
the
are we, Jim?
opportunity here is, I'm sorry, Tracy.
No,
one
I
quick
was just going
point.
to say, I'm agreeing with you. Where are we? We're still in the basement with
Right.
who are the two guys in the janitor's closet, right?
But to attain escape velocity from the janitorial closet, we have an excellent opportunity here to pull this stuff together. But realizing that being cool in the janitorial closet, it ain't going to get the job done here. We have to go find where people will appreciate these synergies more. And to me, it's in these other venues. So it's a question that the problem comes in as to how we define our industry and where we're willing to go disrupt.
So last week we talked about this, and we said that we are really in the building information business, right? Or we want to be, let's put it that way. We aspire to be. And I think in that light, if you look at it like that, then what we talked about in the previous week, and what we talked about in the Smarter Summit in Atlanta, and what I'm going to ask Rick to comment on, is that people are asking for that. People are asking for information about their buildings, right? They know it can be controlled, they know it can be automated and all that kind of stuff, but what people are saying, I think the problem is the language is not coming through, or the language is not being, the right language is not being used, or we're talking past each other, or whatever it is. Rick?
Well, yeah, and it was what David Wilson was talking about last week, relative to the different kinds of data types all being able to be pulled together to create information and KPIs and new ways of managing, new ways of positioning the competitiveness of their buildings. I mean, this is what the market is crying for. And, you know, we've just had another conversation over the past few days with another large entity that is going out, and they're going to be asking for their new managed service provider to be able to give them a roadmap for how all these different systems are going to connect and talk to each other. And it reminds me, it flashes back 15 years to when the governor of the state of Missouri, you guys have all heard me talk about it, said, why can't we use IT technology to pull together all these different data types to be able to be more management a better, more proactive manageability of all the different aspects of my buildings, 4,000 of them.
What I fear is that people are saying that, and we as an industry are hearing, oh, I need to make my controller IP centric, or I need to make my controller better, or I need to put more megabytes in my controller. That's not what they're asking for. They're not asking for a better controller. They're asking for better access to information, which is what Steve was talking about, accessibility.
Right. And one of the things that we're saying, and we got to figure out what words to use for this, is it's not data that they're looking for. It's not information necessarily. It's to have access to all the different things, whether it's a camera. So you don't think of the image coming from a camera as data, do you? But Elon Musk used a data infrastructure to be able to use camera data interacting with other things, but he didn't call it data enhanced driving. He just made the stuff work together. And so the stuff coming from, so we talk about data enhanced buildings, that's not it. What people are asking for is for all the different things to be able to be interoperable so that they can create solutions that use the bits, the digits, the IO, in creative new ways. And we're right there.
There's a lot of great comments on the chat, by the way, guys. And if you've been
I
following,
agree.
there's a lot of feedback there.
I've been responding there.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
getting,
what's kind of interesting, whoever said it, I think it was Jim, about the pieces existed before they were all pulled together properly to be cool, right? And we're starting to see that. We've both complained and discussed this in this forum many times in the form of all these standalone application specific IoT type of things that are showing up in buildings all over the place. It's just a matter of who's going to pull all that stuff together properly and have the infrastructure to support all of that. To somebody's comment on the chat about platform, right? Or ecosystem, actually, I think is a better word.
yeah, I think Albert mentioned that.
Yeah.
So we're at the top of the hour. Anybody want to wrap this up?
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah, it did.
I'll pick on Roger.
Okay.
Volunteering.
2 weeks in a row. Yeah, I think, it's getting back to something I think that we talked about before, but if you talk about the smartphone and the as Jim was pointing out and others, that it's a combination of all those things. The architect kind of builds, a kind of container for everybody working, but also the functionality. And then the people who are trying to make it work and do things are all doing it in isolation. I guess is what we're saying is if the solution that's required needs all the parties, somehow we're going to have to get the designers at the outset together to actually make this single function work properly. Because can that be one person? I don't think so, because the building, it can't be a Jobs or it can't be, a Tesla, or it can't be those sort of things, because there are multiple things. But the building itself could be, if people were strong enough and intelligent enough, because the problem is that not everybody is thinking about the things that we're thinking at this moment, because they're into concrete and windows and functionality, and somehow it's all got to be pulled together. And that's going to be the challenge of being this disruption, because until they're all joined up, it's difficult to see how we're going to have that disruption unless you take it down into very small elements within a building. And that probably won't give you what Bill was talking about, having a better building, because part of it might work great, but not all of it. So it's going to need a unified approach from the industry to make this work.
Which is why we're having this discussion. And
Exactly.
Why all of these.
But there's not many architects or mechanical contractors on the call.
If I could add
we
something
need
just
to bring
quickly, it could be useful for us to attempt to try and write some of the mandatory requirements of an IBB. Although we talked that they only have 2 operating systems for phones, they do share an awful lot of the way they move and a whole bunch of things. We need to maybe define some of that and maybe be a little more controlling. That might help.
Okay, we need to bring this to a close. Thank you very much. It's been great conversation. As Anna said, the time has flown by. So thank you. We'll get a video up tomorrow probably, and we'll come back next week for a sort of a wrap-up conversation about disruption. Figure it out.
Good
So,
call. Thank
thanks
you.
all. Bye-bye.
Cheers.